The smoke in the room had barely cleared, and the sharp, metallic scent of ozone still hung heavily in the air, a visceral reminder of the devastating magic that had filled the space just moments before. On the bed, a young boy sat up, his dark hair disheveled and his body still radiating a faint, residual heat. For a long moment, the room was dead silent, save for the crackle of lingering magical energy. Then, a low, intense sound broke the quiet. The boy began to chuckle. It started as a faint, ragged whisper, a small sound that quickly transformed into a deep, echoing laugh. He smiled intensely, a burning fire igniting deep within his eyes. He muttered to himself, filled with absolute awe, thinking about how amazing, how truly terrifying that magic had been. Throughout his entire life, he had always known that magic was a fascinating, beautiful force, a power that shaped the very foundations of the world. But experiencing it like that, feeling the sheer weight of an absolute master's power, changed everything. To think that it was actually possible for a human being to reach that terrifying level of strength was beyond anything he had ever imagined. His heart hammered violently against his ribs, not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated excitement. As his emotions peaked, a brilliant, wild aura flared up around his body, casting dancing shadows against the walls of his chamber. Standing at the foot of the bed, a young maid gasped, clutching her hands to her chest in utter shock. She stared at the young master, her eyes wide with disbelief, completely bewildered by his reaction. Next to her, a male servant stood frozen, his jaw dropped as he watched the boy's magical aura surge. The maid could hardly process what she was witnessing. To face the absolute terror of Nova Mist, the most powerful witch in the kingdom, and to end up more fired up than traumatized was completely insane. Anyone else would have been broken, weeping, or paralyzed with fear, yet here was this boy, practically begging for more. The male servant looked at the floor, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of his neck as a profound realization washed over him. He thought to himself that individuals like the young master, people who looked absolute destruction in the face and smiled, possessed a truly terrifying, limitless potential. They were the ones who reshaped history, the ones who shattered every known boundary of magical theory. Slowly, the wild aura around the boy began to recede, settling back beneath his skin as he calmed his breathing. He fell into a deep silence, staring blankly at the blanket draped over his knees. His mind drifted back to the woman who had put him in this bed. He recalled her face, her effortless movements, and the title she held. She was the Royal Academy principal. The words echoed in his mind, carrying an immense weight. The Royal Academy. Just the thought of it sent a thrill through his veins. It sounded like an absolutely fascinating place, a grand stage where the secrets of the universe were laid bare. Seeing the distant, longing look on the young master's face, the maid stepped forward, her voice taking on a cheerful, informative tone. She explained that the Royal Academy was indeed the most prestigious institution in the entire country. It was a legendary place that gathered only the finest, hand-picked elites from every corner of the kingdom. She smiled, adding that according to the rumors, their magic research facilities were fully equipped with ancient artifacts, massive libraries, and state-of-the-art laboratories that defied imagination. However, as she looked at his small frame, her smile turned slightly sympathetic. She gently reminded him that while she completely understood his eagerness and his sudden passion for higher magic, his enrollment was still a distant dream. Age-wise, he was simply too young. The academy rules were strict and unyielding. "Master Zenan," she said softly, "your enrollment won't be for another 3 years." The boy remained silent, processing her words. He closed his eyes and let out a soft sigh. He knew she was right. 3 years was a long time. Furthermore, because it was the most prestigious academy in the country, filled to the brim with prodigies and nobles, he had to be realistic. He might not even possess the necessary skills or the raw magical capacity to get in yet anyway. He realized he had no choice but to be patient, to wait until he was old enough to officially enroll and pass the rigorous entrance exams. The maid nodded in agreement, glad to see him returning to reality. She assured him that there was absolutely no point in rushing things. Taking his time, steadily building up his strength, and mastering his fundamentals day by day was the perfect path forward. The Royal Academy wasn't going anywhere, after all. it would still be standing, waiting for him when the time was right. Yet, as the maid watched him, a deeper, more cynical thought crossed her mind. She knew the reality of the world they lived in, and more importantly, she knew the terrifying nature of the woman who ran the academy. The person known as Nova Mist was notorious throughout the kingdom. Unless something actively piqued her personal interest, unless a person or an event was profoundly entertaining to her, she couldn't care less about anything or anyone else. To Nova Mist, the world was divided into two categories, things that amused her and things that did not. The maid visualized the students who historically attended the academy. There were those rare, dazzling geniuses, like a brilliant elf girl who had managed to catch the principal's fancy, becoming a shining star in her eyes. And then, there was everyone else. To Nova Mist, the students she found uninteresting were viewed as nothing more than pebbles on the roadside, completely invisible, utterly irrelevant. Before today, the young master, Zenan, was just that, a roadside pebble in the grand scheme of things, a background character who shouldn't have even crossed paths with someone of her stature. The maid thought to herself that managing to cross wands with a legendary figure like Nova Mist was an incredibly impressive feat for the young master, a story he could tell for the rest of his life, but reality was harsh. After 3 whole years of waiting, a fickle, chaotic woman like Nova Mist would probably forget all about his existence entirely. Zenan smiled faintly, a bit bittersweetly, acknowledging the thought. He supposed she was right. A woman like that lived in a completely different dimension. Suddenly, a heavy, deliberate knock echoed through the room, cutting their conversation short. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and a tall, imposing figure stepped into the light of the medical bay. It was Zenan's father. He possessed a stern, intimidating countenance, a face that usually struck absolute terror into the hearts of his subordinates and political rivals alike. He looked at his son, his voice deep and rumbling as he asked how the boy was feeling. Zenan blinked in surprise, sitting up a bit straighter. He assured his father that he was completely fine, that his body felt light, and the pain was entirely gone. The male servant in the corner let out a quiet sigh of relief, thankful that the young master was truly out of danger. Zenan's father stared at his son for a long moment, his gruff exterior softening just a fraction. He told Zenan that if worst came to worst, if he felt even a single ache or a phantom burn, he would personally gather every single doctor in the city to examine him, so all Zenan had to do was say the word. Zenan looked at his father, an affectionate, slightly amused thought crossing his mind. His dad had a terrifying face, but beneath that iron facade, he was actually a massive, doting softy who worried entirely too much. Setting his worries aside, the father's expression turned serious once more. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pristine envelope, sealed with an elegant, intricate wax stamp. He informed Zenan that someone had entrusted him with something specifically for him. It was a letter left behind by Nova Mist herself before she vanished back to the capital. Zenan's eyes widened, a wave of curiosity and apprehension washing over him. His father sighed, murmuring that he had heard the rumors of what happened on the training grounds, that Zenan had actually crossed wands with the witch. The imposing man leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper as he admitted how terrified he had been when the servants brought Zenan into the manor, completely burnt to a crisp, like a piece of charcoal. Zenan looked down, rubbing the back of his neck nervously, offering a hasty apology, stating that it was entirely his fault for letting his emotions get the better of him and turning a simple greeting into a magical duel. His father quickly shook his head, waving his hand to dismiss the apology. He told his son that it was perfectly fine, that if a person got tangled up with that chaotic witch, there was absolutely nothing they could do. He told Zenan to just treat the entire incident as if he had been struck by a sudden, unpredictable natural disaster, like a lightning bolt from a clear blue sky. Zenan noticed a distant, hollow look appearing in his father's eyes, and he couldn't help but wonder if his dad had suffered a similar, deeply traumatic experience with Nova Mist in his own past. Zenan took the letter, breaking the wax seal with trembling fingers. He unfolded the parchment, and as he began to read the elegant yet chaotic handwriting, Nova Mist's voice seemed to echo in his mind. The letter began casually, stating, "To Zenan Restanata, sorry about earlier. I totally messed up my power adjustments and ended up burning you to a crisp." Zenon's eyebrow twitched and he muttered a sharp, irritated comment under his breath, wishing she would just shut up with the casual apologies. The letter continued, saying, My healing magic should have been absolutely perfect though, so please forgive me. Now, for the main topic. I know this is incredibly sudden, but I have officially decided to recommend you for the Royal Academy's early enrollment program. Zenan froze, his eyes scanning the words over and over again. The letter explained that this system was designed to nurture exceptionally talented individuals in a proper, high-level environment from an early age, rather than letting their potential rot. However, the next line revealed her true nature. She wrote, "Well, I actually just made this program up on the spot, so it is practically tailor-made, just for you." Zenan's jaw tightened as he read on. Nova Mist confessed that, as expected, she had ended up getting a massive earful from the Academy's higher-ups and the conservative board of directors for trying to bypass the rules. As a compromise to quiet them down, she had agreed that they had to admit at least 4 other students through this newly fabricated early enrollment program. She concluded the letter with a cheerful, flippant remark, writing, "Well, that just means you will not be lonely on your journey, so it works out perfectly, right? Anyway, I will be waiting for you at the capital. From Nova Mist." A heavy, absolute silence fell over the room. Zenan, the maid, and the male servant all stared forward, their faces completely blank, frozen in a state of absolute stunned disbelief. The sheer audacity of the woman, creating an entire institutional program just because she wanted to play with a new classmate, was mind-boggling. Zenan could only utter a weak, breathless question, asking if she was actually serious. The scene fades, and the wheels of time begin to turn rapidly. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye, melting away the cold winter and bringing forth the vibrant, colorful arrival of spring. Outside the Grand Restanata estate, the morning sun gleamed off the polished wood of a luxurious, high-end carriage. The horses stamped their hooves impatiently against the cobblestones, their breath misting slightly in the cool spring air. The butler stood by the open door of the carriage, his posture immaculate as he called out towards the mansion, announcing that the young master's carriage was officially ready to depart. Inside the foyer, Zenan stood adjusting the collar of his pristine new uniform, a nervous sweat breaking out on his brow. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, thinking to himself that this entire situation was way too sudden, and the principal's methods were just completely, undeniably unhinged. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves, and stepped out onto the porch, calling back to the butler that he was coming. As he walked down the stone steps, a profound sense of destiny washed over him. Even though the circumstances were chaotic, even though he had been dragged into this by a whirlwind of a woman, his new journey was finally beginning. He looked up at the clear blue sky, his eyes reflecting a sharp, unwavering determination. He realized that he was about to step onto the exact same stage, the very same setting, as the main story of the original game he knew so well. The background character, the roadside pebble, was no longer watching from the sidelines. His new life at the Royal Academy was about to begin, and there was no turning back. He would spread his wings and soar into a much wider, more dangerous and thrilling world as his magic-crazed life accelerated at a rapid, unstoppable pace.